Welcome to the Profit Tool Belt podcast, folks, just for contractors. Now, whether you serve residential or commercial customers, doesn't matter. If you're interested in the business of the contracting business, then welcome to the show. This is where we talk about the business of business and you get an unfair advantage. I want to set you up for success in ways you never even thought of and your competitors haven't even touched. You're going to be learning things on this show that other people don't even consider. So you're probably going to get more in this 1 hour than most people will get in a lifetime of thinking they're running a business and you realize they're just playing at it. You're taking it seriously. Today's guest is Dr. David Clarke, and we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go inside our minds. I wanted to bring him in. He's the author of a book called They Can't Find Anything Wrong, which is a pretty interesting sounding book. I have to admit, I've got to get it. I have two people I know I want to buy it for, and I'm going to read it first. But today we're going to be talking about business owners' self-sabotage, the imposter syndrome, and addictions. You can find Dr. David Clarke on his website, endchronicpain.org. That's a great way to learn more about him. But of course, listen to the episode. I know it's going to give you a lot of value. This episode's important because we can work as much as we want on the technical aspects of the business, but the strategy side gets impacted by our own personal beliefs as leaders, as owners. Some of you are at $1 million or you're at 900 grand and you're like, I don't know what it's like to be a 1.5 business. I don't know what it's like to be a $3 million business. And what's funny is somebody else is listening and they're already a $3 million business. And they're saying, I don't know what it's like to be a $5 million business where I have lots of time, where I have opportunity. None of us has all the answers. It's who we are that gets us there and who we are that gets us past that. I know this about you, even though we may have never met. You're the kind of person who gets things done. Otherwise, there is no way you'd be listening to this show. Anyways, if you ever want to learn more about this and dig deeper, shoot me a text. You guys know my cell phone number. It's 315-903-7853. And just say, Dom, let's talk. And then you know what we'll do? We'll talk. But first, I want to talk about an extension of the mindset thing. And that extension is dad jokes. Now, why dad jokes and why bad jokes and why dad jokes poorly delivered with poor timing? Because we got to get your minds open. It's all about mindset today. And so since Dr. David Clarke is two kinds of doctor, he's a gastroenterologist and a psych. I want to say psych. He deals with psych because I know he wrote another book called Psychophysiologic Disorders, right? So we're going to do colonoscopy jokes today, boys, because that's something we can all relate to. So here's a couple of colonoscopy jokes for you. I'm already blushing. There might be some words in here that we don't normally use, but if you've got kids listening, maybe just put this on pause for a bit. It's not going to be too bad. My friend asked me about what happens during a colonoscopy. I started to tell her, but explaining the process was a real pain in the butt. Oh, I'll say butt. Okay, the kids can listen. I started to tell her, but explaining the process was a real pain in the butt. Here's one you can use. It's a little quick one-liner. My colonoscopy wasn't the best experience of my life, but it sure was up there. After my colonoscopy, I asked my doctor and nurses if I could list them as references on my resume. I mean, after all, if you think about it, they're the only ones who truly know me inside and out. Now, the colonoscopy was a while ago and I forgot to pay my bill. Now I'm in arrears. Doctor called me back and says I have to go for another colonoscopy next week. It's a real bummer. Yeah. I mean, I know when I walk in there, I'm going to hope that my doctor has a rebuttal ready for the colonoscopy joke. Everything went as planned during the colonoscopy, but at the same time, it was a real shit show. Yeah. Now, I'm not the only one in my family who had to have a colonoscopy. My dad had to have one. And then it turns out he had to have surgery to remove a tumor they found in his colon. Now he has a semicolon. Oh, these are coming fast, folks. You got to write them down. I was thinking about the colonoscopy I just had, and believe it or not, getting the camera up there really doesn't hurt as much as you might think. It's the photo and video crew fitting in there that was the real killer. Oh, all right, we're going to end with this one. What do you call an Irish proctologist? Colonoscopy. Okay. All right, folks, we got to get to serious stuff here. Stay to the end of the show for a specific training segment. I'm going to simplify and solve a common business problem. I think you're going to enjoy it. Remember, at any time, you can shoot me a text if you've got questions about your business, about business coaching, about profitability, about systems, about family business, about some of the things that we're going to explore and discuss here today with Dr. David Clarke. My cell phone number, for those of you that need it, is 315-903-7853. Talk to you soon. Well, we'll see you on the other side. Dr. David Clarke, how are you?
I'm great. It's a beautiful day in Portland, Oregon, and we don't get too many of those in October.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird year here where I think we're going to pay for it later.
Don't say that. Be optimistic, Tom. Come on now.
Optimistic. Well, as you know, I'm in the Pacific Northwest as well. And every time, it rains, I'm like, well, it'll be like that till March. And then every time it's sunny, I'm like, what's going to happen here in February?
It's a little tease we get from time to time during the winter. Yeah, we know about that.
It's the price we pay for living inside the postcard.
And some of the best summers in the world.
Right? It's nice. Yeah.
Just don't tell California.
No, they don't need to know. They got their own problems. So listen, you and I are here today talking to, as you know, trade contractors, the owners of growing contracting businesses. And this is kind of outside the scope of what people would normally expect to get on a, construction trades podcast. We're going to go inside our heads, like really inside our heads, because you are a doctor. That's why I call you Dr. David Clarke.
Mm-hmm.
You've written a book called They Can't Find Anything Wrong, which I'm going to have to get and give to both my mom and my wife. But you and I are here to talk today about addictions. Specifically, I reached out to you because of the growing Instagram addictions that we see and how that's eating people's times and also getting their heads off their game. So can I set the stage for you?
Let's go.
Dr. David Clarke, who the heck are you? And how is it that you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors all over the world?
I'm a double board certified internal medicine and gastroenterology doctor, and I was supposed to have a perfectly ordinary career in that line, but unexpectedly, I ran into a patient in 1982 that I didn't know the first thing about diagnosing or treating. And I'd been doing really well up to that point. And then I ran into this patient. I'm going, what in the world is going on? Right. Because with that patient, they couldn't find anything wrong. And I accidentally stumbled on the fact that there was a serious psychology behind her illness, that her brain was creating symptoms in her body that were just as real as symptoms caused by organ diseases or structural damage. But to relieve it, you had to understand what was going on in her head. And that was the start of my journey. I'm now 7,000 patients later, patients like that one, talking to people about what went on in their lives, what happened to them. And sometimes it was what happened to them as kids. And these issues can lead to assumptions that people develop about themselves that are highly stressful, can lead to personality traits, can lead to deep emotions that they don't know are there, can lead to triggers in your present day life, can lead to all kinds of problems in business, either trying to become successful or what to do after you've become successful. Those issues are impacted. And then finally, the addictions are actually methods of self-treatment for the underlying stress, ways to cope. And it's not just Instagram, it's pretty much any kind of addiction can be a way for somebody to try to cope. So we're not going to get into a bunch of psychobabble today. You're not going to hear 6-syllable terms about what's going on in people's heads. This is all more about just what people have learned about themselves, what assumptions they've formed about themselves that actually are not true and lead to problems.
Yeah. My brain is firing in a million directions. Now I'm wondering, I'm sure I have my own limiting beliefs that came to me through just growing up. I don't even want to say through childhood, just growing up, the things that happened, and what flashes through our minds. But, this show's about the business of the contracting business. And I am a business coach for success. We try to, help people grow to wherever they want to grow. there's no measurement for success. It's whatever they define, which each of us defines. But there's also limiting factors. There's limiting beliefs. There's sometimes they come out as excuses. Sometimes we never hear them. It's just things that people do, self-sabotage. Or the reason I reached out to you is Instagram specifically. I'm hearing more and more from clients who are saying, Dom, I'm short on time. And we're like, okay, well, let's break that apart. We're talking about time management, or one of our coaches, Jake or Lee, is talking to a client. They're like, oh, I'm short on time. We're like, okay, everybody's short on time. So let's break it down. And we realize that when they finally have a minute to themselves, they're jumping on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube videos, the shorts. They're really quick little bursts of energy that they get. And I thought, well, maybe there's something there that we can at least bring awareness to by talking to somebody like yourself. So.
Yeah, the algorithms that they have on Instagram, they're designed to feed you exactly what you're interested in, exactly what gives you your best hit of dopamine in your brain, which is sort of the pleasure chemical that people get from pretty much any kind of addiction they might have. And so it's only natural you're going to keep going back for those hits, especially if you're not getting enough of them from elsewhere in your life. And most of my patients who've had an addiction, and it doesn't have to be to Instagram, it can be to drugs, it can be to alcohol, nicotine, exercise, work, sex, gambling, food, lots of different things that give people those little hits that they need because elsewhere in their life, there's a high level of stress. So in my work, I'm looking for where those stresses are coming from. And for many people, it started when they were growing up, as you say, and they're in an environment that, to put it in the most general terms, they would never want for a child of their own. If they were to imagine their own kid or another kid that they care about growing up in exactly the same environment they did, they would see things that they would not be happy about. They would see things that they would never want for that kid. And if they're, let's say, forced to be a fly on the wall watching the kid try to cope with all that stuff, it's going to make them really sad or angry to see that. And what happens from those toxic or adverse early environments is you can absorb the assumption about yourself that you're not as good as other people, or that you're second rate, or you're a worthless piece of crap, that you can be trying to fix what's going on in that early environment. And because you're a kid, you fail. And that typically will make it, people wind up in my office, they just try all that much harder. They continue to fail. They feel even worse about themselves. They become perfectionists. They become very self-critical. They're so focused on what other people need that they neglect themselves. They're not learning how to play. They're not learning how to be a kid. They're not learning to do self-care things. And, no surprise, they carry those characteristics on into their adult years. They don't believe that they deserve success. And that's, what leads to the self-sabotage, leads to the stress, which leads to the addictions.
How does it, again, a million directions I should go. And I think everybody in the audience is saying, Dom, ask him this next. Well, I'm going to, how does self-sabotage show up? And the reason I ask that is I want people to be aware. And I want to be aware. Am I doing that to myself? Where do you see symptoms of or examples of self-sabotage?
I think one of the more common ones is what I would call a disrespect button. If you come through a challenging early environment and that teaches you that you're not as good as other people, you're going to be very sensitive to that as an adult. And it's not going to take too much for you to feel disrespected. And you're going to have, such wounds from your growing up experience that's really going to set you off. And this happens primarily to men. When you read about or hear about a road rage incident, for example, or a domestic violence incident, it's well over 90% of the people who are committing those things are men. And why are they doing that? They're feeling disrespected, usually over something, relatively minor. And it can happen in the workplace as well. And if you react with an exaggerated response to that because of how you've been made to feel as a kid, the person you're reacting to is not going to take it very well, and
Right.
thus the sabotage.
And it holds us back. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I find that one of the things that I hear from people as they're growing, and we'll just pick a number out of the air. It's a contractor who's doing $1 million in sales, which is a arbitrary number. It's random. But what they'll say to me is, I don't know. We've never been 1.5 before. I don't know what to do to get there. And there's a concept that I learned about a long time ago. I wonder if it's the right one, which is the imposter syndrome. Does that play? Is that an accurate path for us to explore? And is that something that you see in, let's talk about the imposter syndrome for
Yeah,
business.
imposter syndrome is where you have found yourself in a position that you don't feel qualified for. And
Mm.
why would you not feel qualified for it if you have arrived at that place? And why would you feel like, oh, somebody has given me this job and I'm fooling them somehow, or that they don't really know the real me. They don't really know that I'm not qualified for this. They don't really know that I'm not worthy of a $1 million
Not worthy.
contracting business.
Yeah.
And you've been given that message early on, usually while growing up. And if you can understand where that came from, that it came from how somebody else treated you, somebody important in your early environment was putting that assumption into you. Many of my patients, their early years were somewhat like they had been parachuted into a dangerous environment, like the middle of a forest in northern British Columbia, for example, or the middle of the Himalayas. And they somehow had to find their way out of there. So they've actually done a remarkable thing, but they don't. None of us has a parallel life to compare ourselves with. So when we look back, we don't necessarily recognize how much we had to overcome. And so we, instead of thinking of ourselves as showing heroic perseverance to come through those early experiences, we think of ourselves as undeserving and second rate. And so when we the hard work and the attention to detail and the persistence that people had as kids to get themselves through these environments is so valuable in the business world. Makes for success. But then when you arrive at success, it's like, nope, I must have been fooling people. And that's the imposter syndrome. And the way to overcome it is to look back and say, you know what? I was actually a pretty remarkable little kid. You can get a better sense of that if you, instead of imagining yourself growing up, imagine a kid of your own in that same environment. It makes it much clearer what you actually overcame.
Yeah. You're, I don't want to reveal too much because I feel like I'm going to get, an awkward comment back, but I'm okay with it. I can remember my parents saying to me when I'm, trying to discipline my kids, they're like, oh, don't be so mean. Dominic, you got to calm down. And I'm looking at my parents and I know how I was raised and I know how they had reacted to me. And listen, I grew up in a very loving, I'm proud, like I had it all. I had great parents, great home. We didn't have a ton of money because we didn't, but everything, it was all love. Everything's based on love. But when I pushed it too far, I'll just say there were consequences. I don't want to overshare here. But now if I was ever to get mad at my kids, my parents would say, you have to calm down. Don't be so harsh with the kids. And I look at them, I'm like, you're not the same people.
Yeah. Yeah, that I hear that a lot. One of my friends who was treated very harshly as a boy, his father, eventually passed, and he went to the funeral, and all of these people stood up and were singing this man's praises. And my friend did not recognize the man who was being spoken about because his own personal experience with the man as his father was very, very different. And it's very possible for parents who mean well, who want the best for their kids, to create an environment of intense pressure for the kids. They just want their kids to do well, and whenever they notice the kid has got some room for improvement, they will point it out, which, seems perfectly reasonable thing for a parent to do. But if you're doing it a lot and it's not balanced with a certain amount of support and praise and listening and just being with the kid, then it can come across as, you're somebody who needs advice. You're somebody who is falling short. You're somebody who's not
Can't do it on their own.
measuring up in some way. And I have seen people, especially, teens, or in my office with stomach pains of one sort or another. And mom and dad, with all the best intentions of the world, have been putting one straw after another on that camel's back. And it can get to be too much.
Since you bring up the parents a lot, and I guess we all knew it was going to go to, the parents at some point, or how we were raised, or some traumatic childhood experience. And I can't really do anything about that. If I really believe in self-control, the internal and external locus of control type of mentality,
Yes.
which we call the victor-victim mentality here, or concept on this show, and the way we do our coaching. By the way, folks, if you want to read more about that, the book, The Oz Principle, is great on that. And you may have other suggestions, Doctor. But we're now talking to people who are parents, and in a lot of cases are grandparents. They're also grandparents. How do I change my language so that I'm giving my kids or my grandkids the right push in the right direction? I'll just leave it that general.
Yeah, it's something that I learned from my patients that helped me to be a better parent. And especially when they get to be adolescents, I tried to focus on noticing when the kids were doing something well. And the reason for that was that, when they leave the household and they go out into the world, they are getting a constant barrage of feedback that they're falling short in one way or another. I mean, they're getting it from their peers, from their teachers, from their coaches. If they're in an artistic area, they're getting it from the people who are teaching them those things. And so it's a constant drumbeat of feedback about everything to do with their lives, whether it's grades or athletic performance or their clothes or their physical appearance. So I wanted them, when they came back home, to have at least some kind of an oasis of support from us. If they came back home and all they were getting was one comment after another, however well-intentioned, that they needed to do this, that, or the other better, then they're never getting a break. It's from the time they get up to the time they go to bed, they're getting a constant barrage.
Yeah.
So I read of a athletic coaching group in the San Francisco Bay Area that recommended a 5-to-1 ratio of support to advice, particularly for adolescents. And that rang true for me. So what it meant was that I had to hold my tongue and choke things back repeatedly with my kids. And instead, I would just try to notice when they did something well, and I would let them know that I noticed. I didn't have to jump up and down. I wasn't giving them empty praise. I was just letting them know that I noticed when they did something well, and it had to be a genuine thing that they did well. And then just let the other stuff go. One of my boys had, I don't know, half a dozen speeding tickets after he got his driver's license. And
so he's really good at speeding.
Well, gosh. I just, he knew that he messed up, but he didn't need me to tell him. So usually I would try to tell him something that I had done that was at a similar level of messing up when I was his age. And, I didn't ground him or anything. I just kind of let him know that, and I think I might have shared the statistics around what kills teenagers because, automobile wrecks is high on the list. And that was, I let it go at that. My younger son, his room was so messy that you pretty much could not see the carpet. You'd walk in there and you couldn't see the carpet because it was covered with crap. Now, a lot of parents would have said, "What is the matter with you? Clean this mess up." No, I just let him go. Inside behind that door, let him live whatever way he wanted to live. Because both boys in the rest of their lives, they really had it together. And I was, very proud of them. And I had to hold off on trying to give them advice, which was, really hard. I mean, as a physician, I pay a lot of attention to detail. I want things to be done right.
Right.
I'm constantly working to improve the capacity and level that I work at, and to not do that with my own two boys, it was hard.
It sounds like a pick your battles type of heading or
Yeah.
chapter, like we've
Oh,
been
yeah,
saying.
absolutely. And just, just noticing when they did things well, they really appreciated that. And it made them feel good about themselves. And when you have that core belief in yourself,
Mhm.
it's very helpful because especially a teenager, when they go off and they leave the household and they're not under your watchful eye anymore, they are going to have numerous opportunities to do things that are dangerous, stupid, illegal, or all three. And what's going to make them say no to those things?
Yeah.
They've got to have that inner self-confidence, that inner belief that they can make a choice, that they're not going to yield to peer pressure because they have that inner confidence. So both of them, they're now around the age of 40 and very successful in multiple levels. I couldn't be prouder of them.
Yeah. Your summary there made me think of the number of family businesses that we have in the audience. And the only way I think we'd have the same ratio of family businesses is if this show was all about the restaurant business.
Hmm.
Contracting just has so many family business overlays. It's a lot like a restaurant industry.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it, and you probably recognize this, or at least this is my observation. You can't just say one thing and it applies to everybody. It generally applies. But I've seen that in general, when I see a really good handoff from first generation to second, it's where and again, typically father and son treat each other as peers to the point that at work, he doesn't call him dad and the other one doesn't call him son. It's Jerry and George, and they just talk to each other like that on very measured tones. But I also find that they do Sunday dinners together. We hear that, right? So there's still a family, and that's family time aside from the business. The only correlation or the only other place that we can get that kind of information, or that I get that information, is by following other authors or podcasts in Europe where they have multi-generation companies.
Oh, yes.
Like it's nothing. 6 generations and they make shoes or something, but it's a multi-generation business. They seem to have it a little bit better internalized on how you pass generation to generation. But this I find intentionality of, I want to pass this business to my son or daughter. And so we have to start grooming them. It takes intention. It takes holding back in some areas and doubling down in other areas. And it feels like an experiment every time.
Yeah. And, I don't want to underestimate the challenge of doing that. I mean, all of us have our own ways of doing things, and our kids are not going to do it the same way. And we need to give them the space to explore that. They're going to chafe under restrictions if we put them on them. But if we give them some room to express their individuality, it's going to go much better.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you raised, and I hope everybody picked up on that. They're not going to do it the same as you. So they might
Yeah.
be a very effective leader, but with a completely different leadership style, where you're very, somebody's very detailed and monotone. Another person might be more animated and big picture. And neither of those two leadership styles is wrong. It's just the leadership style. But if I see that as a deal breaker, or that let's say my daughter isn't able to fill my shoes because she doesn't lead the same way I do, I'm wrong. I'm just wrong. And that, of
Yep.
course, is not the only measurement, but it's one of
Yep.
them.
And when you don't do that, I mean, there was a company that you can look up called Dart Industries, which had, a father and son team running it, and it just fell apart over not handling these issues well. It's quite a number of years ago now, but I followed the story for a bit, and it's a good example of how not to do things. Or, the television series Succession, which is full of really terrible people. most of whom have the kinds of problems that you and I are talking about today.
Yeah.
But you can do it so much better if you give the kids respect and space.
Yeah. I find that the most successful businesses and the most successful transitions look very boring from the outside. There's not a lot of drama. It's almost plodding, like PLOD, like just one step ahead of the next, methodically working towards a goal, but not a lot of drama. The ones that have a lot of drama spit off a lot of heat and problems.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the successful ones. That's another issue that some of my patients struggled with is success. And how do you enjoy that success? If you had to survive your childhood years, you had to focus on the needs of other people, work really hard, pay attention to details, be, close to perfectionist. Then when all of those fine qualities bring you to a successful outcome as an adult, can you enjoy it? Can you enjoy your success? And if you are living life on a treadmill that you never step off because you've been living on that treadmill since you were 13, how do you enjoy that success? You're probably not going to. But the same ideas that I mentioned before apply. If you can recognize, how much you had to overcome as a kid and generate an internal respect for yourself for how much you had to endure, then it's a little easier to take some regular time for your own joy. It's an essential human skill to be able to take, I recommend every week, some time that has no purpose, but something fun for yourself. The moral equivalent of finger paints for a 4-year-old. 4-year-old with finger paints doesn't care how many pictures per hour they produce. They don't care about the quality of the work. They don't care who sees it. It's the polar opposite of everything you're trying to do professionally. They're just having a blast, and everybody needs that. And if you don't have that, sooner or later, it's going to catch up with you. And in my patients, it manifests in their bodies, and it can manifest in other ways too. The addictions that we talked about earlier.
So I want to come back to those addictions because just Instagram itself. If you consider, I can consider even me. Instagram didn't exist however long ago, let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Suddenly I've found 20 minutes a day, maybe twice a day, to just be on Instagram, scrolling. I like hunting and fishing clips, so that's what I tend to see. Every once in a while, I have to reset it because I find that they get, when I say worse and worse, like, the hunting videos then become lion chasing zebra videos, and then that goes down this other path. And so my tool for resetting Instagram is every once in a while I put in new search terms like how to paint your baby turtle. And it suddenly it's all this arts and crafts stuff that's still animals, but it's super light. And then my algorithm resets and then it slowly starts to go downhill again. But let's say that somebody does recognize a pattern in their own life, whatever it is, and everybody has taken their own message from this show so far. What do I do to change that pattern if I feel that changing the pattern would be beneficial?
I would take a block of time if you possibly can, and, get out of your normal environment and start thinking about what can I do that's going to be just totally fun for me, and not the passive fun of watching Instagram, but something active. The story I go back to in this line is a woman who I was asked to see at like 6:30 in the morning in the emergency room, and she'd been there all night because of sudden abdominal pain, and she got all the tests and they were all normal. And I'm talking to her about her life, past and present, and it turned out as a girl she was a champion athlete, and she was won a national title in the United States, and was very successful with that. But to do that, she had to practice her sport before school, after school, and on weekends, starting at the age of 4. So now I'm talking to her about her current lifestyle, and she's working full time. Her husband's working full time. She's coaching her 2 daughters in her sport. She's coaching other people's kids in her sport. She's on the athletic club board of directors. She's driving kids to out-of-state competitions. So I'm asking her, well, what do you do for yourself? What do you do for fun? And she really had to think about it. Maybe once every other month, she'd get out to go to a movie with her husband. That was
Mm.
it. The rest of the time, nonstop. And this was,
Yeah.
again, that treadmill lifestyle that she never stepped off. So the point of my story is that I recommended she take a block of time every week, ideally 3 or 4 hours. Not everybody can do that, out of the house, just to do trial and error to find something active that's
Mm.
got no purpose but her own joy. And all she could think of to do at first was go for walks in a park. And her husband was very supportive of this because he recognized that
Burnout
the kind
or
of
whatever.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So for about 6 weeks, that was what she did on her afternoons off. But while she was walking, she was thinking, and she was still having the pain during these 6 weeks, just not as bad. And after 6 weeks, she thought, I'm going to give piano lessons a try. And she'd
Wow.
never done anything musical before, but she just, after 6 weeks of thinking, this is what she came up with. Absolutely loved it. Pain
Mm.
went away.
The pain went away because she filled.
She found something for herself,
Right.
just for herself, that gave her joy.
Mm.
And it was, it's an active thing. It's not sitting there passively receiving
Watching TV.
entertainment. Right.
Yeah. Or
Right.
watching something else. Yeah. Very interesting that it's I think on our coaching team, we remind our clients to spend time, invest time in themselves, but that because you need to put gas back in the tank. It'd be the same as driving your vehicle. I'm going to talk about a gas vehicle now. I know that's going to change in the future without ever changing the oil
Yes.
and expecting that you're going to get the same performance out of the vehicle and it's never one day just going to seize up and just clunk.
Yeah. And, so many of my patients, the idea of taking time for themselves, they've never done that. I mean, again, we go back to when they were kids and they had to focus on something that was a problem in their household, typically that limited their ability to have carefree playtime. And that carefree playtime that most kids get, that's when we learn how to do self-care. That's when we learn how to play. And we still need to play as adults. And if we don't learn as kids, like that athlete woman
Yeah.
never learned, then that's a missing skill. But when I first recommend that people take this time every week, they feel guilty about it because they've never done it before. The idea of focusing on their own needs is foreign concept. So I have to say, look, you went through much more difficulty than you think you did when you were growing up. You had heroic perseverance to come through that. You
Hmm.
absolutely have earned the right to learn this skill and to give yourself this time. But even so, it can take people months to figure this out. But I give them the space. I tell them straight up, it might take you 2 or 3 months to figure this out. But once you do, you
Yeah.
will have this skill for the rest of your life. And whenever your stress level gets too high in the future, you're going to have something to counteract it.
Hmm. Maybe that's why so many people on our show get their stress released by hunting and fishing or taking a kid fishing or doing those things.
Yeah, my younger son caught a 16-pound salmon off of the Oregon coast yesterday. I mean,
Nice.
he was grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah.
He texted a picture of it to the whole family, and my older son, that thing is bigger than Free Willy. It was a real moment.
You'll be having
But
salmon for Thanksgiving,
yeah, no question. And
right? Right.
so the joy from that, you can't replace that.
Yeah. It's, as you were taking us through the arc of that explanation, I remember being a kid myself and I was getting ready for soccer. I was, gonna go play soccer. And my dad walks into my room and he goes, "Get changed. You're gonna go paint a house."
Oh,
And I remember saying, "What's paint a house?" Like I didn't know what that meant. I was, however, old, right? And then guess what? I become a house painter. And then I start running the business and it's goes from there. So those things that our parents did to teach us the good work ethics are, all great intent, but where has it taken us till now? And when you talk about heroes, I think about some of the clients we've had and some of the people we've spoken to who say, and this is a story people will hear know here for sure. Um, the gentleman who put his mom in a home because she needed care, but he could only afford to have her in a quad, right? A room with four people. But one of
Okay.
the other ladies had dementia in that quad. And so his mom couldn't sleep because the other woman was yelling and talking all night. And so he just said to us, look, Dom, I have to do well in business so I can get my mom a private room. And that kind of responsibility that came from, by the way, growing up in a single home, the story is, he said, she took care of me my whole life and now it's my turn to take care of her. But that's an amazing burden of responsibility on a little kid that's now come up to here. And he's proud that he gets to take care of his mom, but it's also his to carry.
Yeah, and I can imagine where, kids have magical thinking, and you can feel very responsible
Mm,
for making sure that any problems in that household are solved. You can feel as a kid that you've got a lot more power to solve those issues than you really do. And if you don't solve them, you try even harder. So yeah, it can create quite a burden, and you can lose the sense that regular playtime for yourself is something you deserve.
yeah. So that's one of the big takeaways is that folks, we need regular, maybe now you pick up pickleball.
Okay.
Oh, or I don't know, everybody's got their thing, or fishing or piano. I never even occurred to me that somebody would opt for piano lessons, but what a beautiful way to invest your time.
She never had done anything musical before, but it worked for her. Myself, I played soccer on various adult leagues for over 20 years. Um, by the end, I had kids that I had coached were either playing on my team or against us. So I kept going well into my 50s playing ball.
Still playing soccer.
And
Yeah,
it
I mean,
was, after being kind and compassionate to my patients all week, to be able to get out there and kick something,
yeah.
it was perfect for me.
Maybe throw a few elbows here and there.
Well,
Maybe
that
behind
that
the
might
referee.
might have happened.
Yeah.
I'm not the beefiest guy, so I had to be careful.
Um, I want to make sure that we leave people with solutions. And we talked about at least one solution, which is to spend, invest in yourself, find a hobby. And if you can't find a hobby, what I learned for you so far is go walking. Invest that time to recharge your batteries doing whatever it is you want to do. Go do your own garden. Not everything, folks, has to make financial sense, even though I always bring it back to revenue responsibility per hour. Uh, uh, Doctor, we refer to that here as or that's a redo of Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, where if somebody
Okay.
else can do it cheaper than you, you should get them to do it so you can work on higher value work. But really, is there any higher value than in feeding your mind and refreshing your soul? For me, it's going to the gym at 6 in the morning. I love it. And I do it. Yeah, I know you're going to have some assessment of me from this, but I'll still say it. I'll still say it. Nobody knows. I haven't taken time for my family. So I still serve my family. They're not even awake. And I get something for me without taking from them. Right.
Yeah, and I would fully support doing that. It's something you're doing for yourself, and we all need that. And if we're not, no matter how much success you have in business, if you're not able to appreciate it and enjoy it,
Mm,
it's kind of like, what's the point? You want to get to a point in business where, yes, as much success as you're able to achieve with your abilities and effort, but at the same time, you want to take satisfaction from it, appreciate it, appreciate yourself for what you've achieved. And many of my patients have absorbed assumptions about themselves early on that limit their ability to have that satisfaction in what they've accomplished.
mm. How do you recognize a limiting belief, though? It's a limiting belief. Unless somebody brings it up, how do you recognize that that I'm limiting myself?
Yeah, I struggled with helping people with that for a long time, and what I kept coming back to was, and people would be telling me up and down that, their childhood really wasn't that bad, that, they know of other people who've been through worse, and they think that, those issues that they had as kids have been resolved at this point? And my response is, okay, well, imagine your own kid or, another child that you know and care about
Mm,
growing up exactly the same way you did, and you're having to watch them, but you can't intervene at all. What is that going to be like for you? And people get a much more accurate sense of how much they had to go through from that kind of exercise. They can defend themselves against um, the emotions around what they had to experience. But when they watch an innocent child that they care about going through those things, they get a much more accurate impression. And that leads to um, a lot more respect for the little kid that they once were.
mm,
And that respect can be then translated into respect in the here and now. And that here and now respect can make it possible for you to set aside more time for yourself, to not feel like an imposter as much, because, after all, you come through that, tossed into the Himalayas kind of experience, and you've come out of that. So that if you've achieved something, no, you are not an imposter. You've achieved it because you've got some
you're
special
an achiever.
qualities. You are an achiever.
Yeah, you're an achiever. You've already achieved a bunch of other things, and history is a great indicator of future success. You're going to keep doing it.
And you can give yourself permission to enjoy your success. You don't have to keep plowing ahead, um, never taking a moment to say, um, I've done some pretty good things here.
Yeah. It's funny. We always think that success is money. That's the first answer. And it to me, it's not. I mean, to others, it is. Everybody's got their wiring. When I'm dealing with family businesses and in the support and training that we do internally with our coaches, we remind ourselves that the most important thing in a family business is the family. That last name, in your case, Clarke, is going to go on. The Rubino name will go on longer than this business will. What if we sell it? What if we sell it in 3 generations? That's a long way off, but we're still selling it. But the Rubino name will continue. And when people are at a crossroads or they're really at odds with each other as a family business, we work really hard to remind them the family's the most important thing. The business is here to serve you guys. So let's, get it in order to do that. Get it lined up to do that, because that's got to be the most important thing.
No question.
Yeah, you wrote a book, and I think we should probably mention it in case somebody listening thinks I'd like to dig deeper into a little how a gastroenterologist is also an expert on that's
A gastropsychologist, I've been
is
called.
that what you
Yeah.
are, a gastropsychologist?
Works well as anything else, I guess. I didn't
Yeah.
expect it, but that's, it was 35% of my patients for, decades. If I didn't know this stuff, all of those, 7,000 plus patients, I would have been at a loss because their organs and structures were fine. So yeah, the
Right.
book is called "They Can't Find Anything Wrong."
Mm,
It was a line that has been said to me many times, but the one
mm,
I remember best is the first story in the book. A patient who was hospitalized at Stanford University 60 times in 15 years, saw a dozen specialists, including a psychiatrist,
wow.
and they couldn't find anything wrong. She was having attacks of severe dizziness and vomiting that would last for up to a couple of days, between 6 and 10 times every year. And half
Mm,
of them were bad enough she had to be put in the hospital. And they, of course, did every test you can think of. And it was all connected to childhood trauma that was still going on in the present day. For her, she was 50 years old, and her mother had been emotionally and verbally abusing her since she was 3.
mm.
And all of her attacks of illness were connected
to
to
to those
those
events.
events. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
either directly or indirectly. And I was able to show her that it was directly connected. And once she saw it, she had one of those light bulb moments, and just bringing it into conscious awareness in her case was enough to relieve the symptoms. She was cured on the spot, went home from the hospital the next day, and called me a year later and said she'd gone the entire year with no episode. So I
Oh,
wish I could cure everybody that quickly, but
yeah, to hear those results and then to hear it, to have somebody give you the feedback and say, "Hey, doctor, it helped, it worked."
Yeah, no, there was no question. I mean, when she had that moment, looked up at the ceiling, said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it."
That they're all
Um,
linked.
and just in her case, just seeing that, other people will need years of psychotherapy to achieve the same outcome, but in her case, she got it, breathed a huge sigh of relief, and that was it for her. She was able to move on.
Ec- Well, congratulations. That's good. We need more of those good stories.
Yeah, there's about 4 dozen in the book that cover the whole spectrum of different kinds of issues that can make people physically ill.
Oh,
But they can also have, impacts on your emotional health and on how you live your life. So there's value from those aspects as well.
hmm. Incredible. It's our body's such a finely tuned machine. We can endure so much. We can manipulate ourselves so much to do things. We can train our minds, train our bodies, train our reflexes. You think about a guitarist and how fast their fingers move to make that music come out. That all has to, I know that has to be trained because every once in a while I pick up a guitar and try. It's not good.
It looks so easy, doesn't
It
it?
looks so easy. Yeah, it looks so easy and it's not. And that book, Dr. Clarke, they can't find anything wrong. That sounds like a normal book. It's not a medical dissertation where we have to
Right.
read.
Yeah. It's written for the public and has a lot of obviously advice if you have one of these issues on how to make changes. I did also edit a book for professionals, and it's written jargon free. We have both physicians and psychologists that wrote for this book. It's called Psychophysiologic Disorders, real ponderous
Flying off
title
the
there.
shelves, I'm sure. No
Yeah,
offense.
it's doing pretty well.
Is it?
And the reason is that there are a bunch of psychotherapists that know about this book, and for
Uh,
their patients who want to get into the science of it,
ah,
we insisted that the physicians write it without the medical jargon, and that the psychologists write without the psychological jargon, and
hmm.
just put it in plain English. And as the
Plain English.
lead
Oh,
editor, I was a hawk all over that. I was tossing out 6-syllable words right and left and replacing them with much easier
normal
ones,
English.
normal English, so that the benefit of that is that the docs can read the psychology and the psychologists can read the medical stuff. And it also means that people who are neither can get a lot out of it. So if you love science and you want to get a little deeper into the uh, more advanced concepts, that's actually a pretty good book. The psychotherapists are prescribing it for their patients who have medical issues, and it's working pretty well for that too.
Maybe this is one of the brain breaks or the we didn't call them hobbies. What can you do that's fun? Maybe people like studying. Somebody there might really like studying. So maybe they
Yeah,
could read that book.
it's got a chapter on the history of all this, going back to an Egyptian papyrus of 1800 BC, where this whole condition was first mentioned.
Hmm.
And it's got a chapter by a patient and the journey that she went through. And then it's got chapters by some of the, world's leading experts on this condition, one after another. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun editing it. People were very enthusiastic. My writers were very enthusiastic.
That's good. And that's called psychophysiologic disorders.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a companion book um, that also has a similar title, but if you look for the psychophysiologic disorders, and the subtitle is a trauma-informed interprofessional diagnosis and treatment. So it sounds very technical, but um, anybody with a high school education can do
Can
very well with it.
digest
Let's
that
put it
book.
that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one is they can't find anything wrong. That's such a normal statement to hear just over a weekend, talking to friends and family and standing at the field, watching practice. Somebody says, "Hey, my mom, they just can't find anything wrong, but she's sick." And yeah, so that's a
Yeah,
great
and
title.
it's astounding what I didn't know this my first 7 years of training, just what the brain can do to the body, and just how ill you can get. One of my patients had this condition, for 79 years of abdominal pain. Another one I was asked to see, it was a teenager in the hospital for 70 straight days when I was asked to see her, getting morphine around the clock for unexplained
Oh,
abdominal pain. Another patient had a completely paralyzed stomach, nothing was moving out of there at all. And it was all three of those where it was from the brain. And I know this because they were all successfully treated by uncovering the stress in their lives and dealing with that.
interesting. Well, it's going to be difficult for us to come up with a title for today's episode. So thank you. Because we started by talking about Instagram addictions, and then we figured that we'd slide over to the imposter syndrome. But it feels like we've walked through a stadium of different opportunities here to think about the mindset is you. I know you know this because you've mentioned it from a different angle, but mindset is such a big indicator and predictor of business success. It's the
Yeah.
attitude that we go into things with. Like I'm a problem solver or I'm a problem victim are just two things. And when you have that, one of the physical we'll end with this, but one of the physical things that I like people to do is sit tall, put their shoulders back, put their chin up and take a deep breath in through their nose and out through their mouth. And that centering feeling to me is the feeling of success. That's the feeling of confidence, of standing strong and being able to take on whatever you're going to bring me. And that's what I want people to have. And all of these things, knowing that we might have our mindset working at odds with us, is another level of that.
Yeah. And when you understand where that mindset came from, it makes it far easier to change it in a positive direction.
Yeah. Dr. Clarke, thank you so much for coming to talk on a construction and contracting show. You probably don't get that request very often.
No, it's really nice to be able to speak with somebody who's crazy enough to invite me onto a show like that. So I appreciate it, and I had a great time. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate you being with us. Have a great day. Well, well, well. What did you learn from Dr. David Clarke? Thank you very much for being on the show, Dr. Clarke. And what can you put in place when we talk about mindset and limiting beliefs and the imposter syndrome? Have you ever stopped to consider where you might be holding yourself back in ways you hadn't even thought of? Um, Interestingly, you can find out more from Dr. Clarke. That book, They Can't Find Anything Wrong. And then his website is endchronicpain.org. Clearly, he is a very well-versed individual in all of these things. And look, when you're out there studying and trying to find ways to move yourself through any restrictions or constrictions you've got, you might as well pull on everything you can. So speaking of critical constraints and our self-limiting beliefs and our internal logic, I wanted to share with you a case study from a recent strategic plan review that we did on our team here. Now, as you guys know, when you start any coaching program with us, there's a strategic planning section. We go and lay out what you want to do in 10 years, 3 years, what you want to accomplish in 1 year. And then that becomes ultimately the coaching agenda that we work through. So I wanted to share a success story with you and how not limiting beliefs, but never having had the opportunity, a business owner, ever having had the opportunity to work with a coach and lay out your goals and then knock them off and see them happening. So I'm going to read to you some parts of the VTO, the strategic plan. I'm not going to share the company name. It's 3 business partners who have a very successful contracting business. They brought us in because there's some transition planning that's happening. And I'll give you some examples of their goals and what they accomplished within 1 year. So this is within 12 months of starting. So boy, is it fun to do the strategic plan review. We do it every quarter, right? You build it once and then you shoulder check it every 3 months to make sure that we're all on track and working on the highest level of priority for the business at the time. So it's very important that if you set out a goal, you're checking against the goal and taking actions against the goal. So this explanation, this case study that I'm doing today is the shoulder check that happened. Obviously, we did them every quarter, but this is the annual one. So it's a bit of a bigger, beefier one. So this company here, by the way, they're doing about 3 million in sales. And so in 3 years, they wanted to be at 5 million in sales with a 15% net profit or about 750K. And we can get them there. We do that all the time. So that's reasonable. That's their goal in 3 years, right? We're already 1 year into the strategic plan. So some of the things that they wanted to accomplish within 3 years was they wanted to digitize the communication between the office and the shops. They wanted to move from having binders to do everything to having digitized communication in the field and also for the work that they do in their shop, right? Already done. That was already done within a year. They had laid out that they wanted to do it in 3 years, and they already got that one done. They wanted to have a new conference room and showroom because they need a showroom in order to increase their average job size. So the most profitable jobs that we found by doing the EOJs are the ones that required having a showroom because it just lends itself to a different type of conversation. That had originally been a 3-year plan. That was already accomplished within a year. Interesting. When we started talking about their people plan for 3 years, remember, this was their original 3-year plan. They wanted to have an organizational chart and an organizational chart forecast. Now, that sounds pretty fancy for language, but it is important that we see our team on a piece of paper because once we see it, we own it and we know where to make the changes. It's much easier to do that. And it's also a visual is a great way to communicate to others. When we started, they didn't have one. Within a year, they have one, but they've already now hired a new estimator, a new project manager, and another support role. They still need a purchaser, and a second PM has already been identified as a need. And of course, using the go back report, they know that they can afford that person. What we've also identified is something called a trigger. So when you're working with any of our coaches on our team, we'll talk to you about triggers. So you can wish to have a project manager, you can wish to hire an office manager, you can wish to hire an estimator, whatever the other position is, that's fine. Wish for it. We're going to do that together. But then we need to have a trigger. And that trigger says, when we hit X, we will take Y action. We will do the other action. And so it's important that we set that. So we've already set that trigger. This is their second PM. From not having a PM before, they already hired one within a year, and they've already identified the need for a second one because of the volume they're doing and the volume they anticipate doing based on our dashboard and tracking. So hopefully you can see all the little cogs on the gears are starting to mesh together. This has only been a year. They also wanted stability in their engineering department. For this particular trade, they do a lot of technical drafting. It's required for projects when they bid on either the commercial side or the residential, mostly on the commercial side. They need a lot of technical drafting. It's called engineering for them, and they need stability in that department. So that's already done. That was done within 12 months. So think about how many of those things you've been trying to put in place in your business, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. Would you be different than anybody else? And how you've been stuck. And imagine a company across the street in the same trade as you who was able to accomplish all those things on their 3-year agenda done in a year. I'm like, okay, Dom, impress me more. Well, here's all the things they accomplished within 1 year. This was their original 1-year plan, and it has now been accomplished. So within 12 months, this company has started to reinvent themselves. Here were their previous goals for the year. Their revenue number, they're going to hit just under the revenue target that we had, but, and I feel bad because I wanted them to hit the revenue target. However, it's still a new record for them. So they're going to hit new record numbers, but not the numbers we had originally aimed at. So yes, we can do better in coaching. And we had some other things we're working on, and we're moving along the right track. Net profits are up. One of the interesting things is they were not calculating net profits correctly for. And so some of the internal work was to make sure that we had clean data, clean information so that net profit could be calculated. That's now being done. And so they're on the right path, moving up towards 15%. They're not at 15 right now, but that was originally our 1-year goal. But we're moving in the right path, and we're happy with the progress they're making because all the steps are there. Here are the steps. So their goals for the year was, number one, to put the end of job reports in place and have a way to track that data and start to use the data to make better decisions. That's already done. So within a year, they've completely changed the way their internal office operations work, and the end of job report is a normal part of their discussion. They also said by the end of the year, we want to be proficient in using I'll just say their software, and it's done. The software is in place. Now, the software is in place. Most of the modules for the new software have been implemented, but some have not. So we can't actually say the software is in place. However, new software was identified, new software was purchased, new software was installed. Everybody's been trained on it, and we're marching through the modules now. So that's pretty good. On the people side, their 1 year goal was to get a shop manager. There's difference between shop and field operations for them. They now have a shop manager. Still open is a bookkeeper slash office manager. And then the other thing they wanted to do is put some recruiting tools that we showed them in place. There's a Myers-Briggs assessment. It's also called DISC. Some of you will recognize it or have done it before. That's an important leadership tool so that we get a measurement of everybody's behavioral style, and that'll help us craft the type of people we bring into the company so that we make sure we're getting a team that's really lined up with how we want to do things. It's a little bit more of an advanced concept, but that's in play. Not done, but it's in play. They also wanted to level up on their technical engineer. You heard me talk about that earlier in their 3-year plan. Done. So today, I think the professional development tool that goes along with this for you is the blind spots assessment. It's a self-assessment you can do to see where your company is today and where you want to grow to. And maybe that dovetails really nicely with this. Remember, right now, I'm giving you a summary of all the things they wanted to accomplish in a year and what they did actually accomplish in a year. The other process that they wanted to have done within the year was to digitize the communication between the office and the shop. You can hear that I repeated that, right? That was originally in their 3-year plan. It got pulled into their 1-year plan. It's been accomplished. So that one's a big tick mark. That company has now evolved. They're firmly in the camp of working smarter, not just harder, right? Then we move to the heading of strategy. What did they want to do from a strategy viewpoint inside their contracting business? So they wanted to implement a different way of doing the production meeting. That's done. They wanted to implement the EOJ and EOJ summary. So we have data, clean data that we can make decisions on. Putting an owner's meeting in place so that we have consistent communication between everybody. And then having a finance and forecast meeting. That's in place as well. And then from that, we move over to what's the cash situation in the company. And they now have places to track and know their numbers. So pretty impressive to think that they've accomplished all of those things within 12 months of starting down the path of really being proactive in running their business. And this is where I sound cheesy, but wait, there's more, because they also had priorities that they wanted to accomplish in the prior 3 months. So everything I've told you up till now was what they wanted to accomplish in 3 years and did, what they wanted to accomplish in 1 year and already did. But here's what they wanted to accomplish in 3 months and completed. They wanted to have clean data so they could track towards the net profit target. As I said before, we're moving on that one. So that one's a win. They wanted to have the software at the percentage where it was. And so that's a win. They wanted to build their business operations flowchart, the manufacturing operations flowchart, their handoffs, their engineering, production, quality control, installation, and field operations flowcharts, as well as their admin and accounting flowcharts. Those have all been done. So those are SOPs. They now have SOPs in place in the business. That was done in the last 3 months. So things move fast when you decide what the priorities are, right? On the data side, we talked a lot about the end of job report, but we also needed a dashboard, imagine one central place to just see all your numbers. It's like the dashboard in your car. You tell how much gas you've got, your oil pressure, your heat, your gas mileage. It's the same thing for the business. We create a dashboard that accurately reflects the business at any given point in time. Looking at the dashboard, you can make a lot of great decisions with confidence about your business. And that was done in the quarter. What else? They got a new operator for a specialty piece of machinery, which was hard to get because there's not a lot of people trained on that. They have a new field person, which is relatively hard to get because there's not a lot of people trained on that specialty trade. On the people side, we had to make sure that we had the right titles. A lot of people have a PM, but some companies will call a PM a project manager, and other companies will call a PM a production manager. That will lead to problems in the future. And so that little change of making sure that people have the right titles makes sure you don't have massive problems and lost customers ultimately in the end. So that change was made. I talked about the regular owners meeting using the finance and forecast meeting structure that we show them. So that's already done. And then onboarding people. So they now have an onboarding SOP. folks, that was all done within a year. 1 year of starting business coaching. So those are the things that happen when you get the momentum in place and you have the structure and the outside perspective to do that. And again, if you want to start down that path, you don't ever have to talk to us to do it. The very first thing you have to do, though, is establish what the start looks like. And if I call the start X, that X point on the map, what does it look like when we get to Y, the next point on the map? And the only definition difference between X and Y is that Y is greater than X. We're moving towards something bigger, something greater. We're growing the business. We're improving. We're taking those steps. We're fixing the business, some people will say. I think the best tool for that, guys, is the blind spots assessment. So go ahead and grab that. Just send me a text and just say blind spots, and we'll shoot that off to you. My cell phone number is 315-903-7853. Just say blind spots, and we'll send you the blind spots assessment. I appreciate you guys checking in. Please, for Dr. David Clarke, his website is endchronicpain.org. His book, which I can't wait to get, is called They Can't Find Anything Wrong. How many have heard that from people in there that they know, friends and family? Look, as you guys know, this podcast is just a holdover until I can have a glass of wine or a cup of coffee with you. Just this weekend, I actually had a glass of wine with Alan. He's one of the boot camp students who's now moved on to the alumni program. And Alan and I had a chance to have a glass of wine this week, and I actually got to meet his lovely wife as well, which was nice. But it was just nice to sit there, really not talking about business, just have a glass of wine and hang out. And I got to tell you, you guys know I'm so social. That's what this whole thing's about. So I appreciate you checking in. I hope you got a lot of value from Dr. David Clarke, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.